Hello, world, and welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. Overcoming avoidance. This is an OG episode, a re-release. But I will say, 4 years later, looking back on this episode, one, I was like, damn, this is good. This is very valuable. Yeah, let's put this back out here for 2024. And also, I'm gonna tell you, waves. This happens in waves. This overcoming. I'm not, I mean, maybe. I'm not sure if there's ever a point where we hit that where we have 100% overcame avoidance. Because I feel like that's along the lines of enlightenment. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's like you cracked the code. You are beyond human if you reach a point in your life where you 100% never avoid ever again. If you do get there, though, I'd like to meet you. I would like to meet you. Show me your tricks. Anything that I don't know because it still happens. I'm here. I'm listening back to this episode, saying when I was doing it even earlier and then how it's better, and then I can say even now it continues to get better and I integrate more things, but there's also still phases where avoidance comes back up when we're going through a more textury, dense time in life, that's when it's going to visit you. And what's wild listening back to this is I'm talking about, well, one, I'm reflecting back on 2017 in this 2021 episode. So again, this whole Inception episode is happening. And back then, yeah, I did not have the tools at all in 2017. I was just getting introduced to the tools of facing myself and my emotions and my darkness, and my trauma had just came up to be faced because I had and then I didn't mention it in that episode, but like I had just left an abusive relationship and then I was living alone for the first time. Yeah, all that came slamming to the surface, and then I didn't have the tools to move through that. Of course, avoidance came in. Avoidance came in and like Mrs. Doubtfire running like help is on the way, dear, because I was in overload. Was way too much. So I was like, yeah, let's do anything else but feel. Let's numb out. Let's drink. Let's smoke. Let's go out. Let's distract ourselves so we have nothing else to do in the day. And then not and barely taking care of myself. Like my place was disgusting, but it was just the state of my internal world, obviously, and it was keeping me alive. So that's also where the grace comes in with avoidance. And when we notice that, of how can we gain a relationship with avoidance and get curious as to why it's here instead of being critical, condemn it, or shame it when it comes up, because I can't remember who says it, but like nothing ever changes through shame. It changes through love. So when avoidance is here, it's about letting it speak and getting curious about what it's protecting us from. And then from there, we can learn and guide it to a different way. But we are not going to get anywhere if we get stuck in being critical whenever avoidance visits us. But yeah, and the other fun fact about this is when I first recorded this episode talking about avoidance and these patterns and um, learning to face myself and not knowing, fully why all that was happening or the beginning. But when I was recording that episode in 2021, I came back and I was still living with my ex that you're going to keep hearing about through if you follow along on the journey. So that's ironic. Overcoming avoidance while still living with my ex at the time, which is why some details were left out and why I was still learning the damn thing and learning to face myself. And I was on my way out, so I was really facing that by being like, okay, we're really done with this, and it's time to face the trauma fully again. Second round, third round, fourth round, 10th round, whatever. But it's interesting to reflect back on of like this whole thing had started in 2017 of of realizing, like, I didn't realize it then, but avoiding all of that pain from the past relationship where I had broken up with him the first time, and then everything was coming up, and it was so much and so overwhelming to be with my feelings at that time. And I was finally safe, so like so much was coming up, and then I was shutting down because I didn't have the tools to feel the density, to feel all my pleasant and unpleasant emotions, and it was mainly unpleasant emotions that were coming up. And then in 2021, when I was sharing this episode and reflecting on that time, I was still, I came back, and then I was currently still living with my ex at the time, but I was in process of moving out, but I just hadn't found a place yet. So it's a very interesting paradoxical thing to listen back to. And now I'm letting you guys all in on the back end details of my life of then I was talking about this topic, and I was still living with the person, and living with my pain. That's the paradox of life, I guess. And then leaving again, like for sure, leaving and being done. That was a whole other layer of learning to be with myself, and facing and overcoming avoidance, because then it was just me and my feelings and my thoughts, and the past self that needed me when I wasn't there, and I was disconnecting and avoiding from the darkness. Wild times. But some tips, because I don't think I didn't give them in this episode, and I would just like to give you some tips to overcome avoidance, because it's an ever evolving, growing process. And the really important thing here is to start small. And that's how we build those habits. Because if we're just like, I'm no longer going to avoid, when that's all you know, it's not going to stick. So we start small, we gain our capacity within our body to be able to face ourselves, and that's how it keeps getting better. So the first tip is definitely re go back and listen to my quick tips on my, yeah, what is it called? Quick somatic tools to reconnect to the body. Those are the episode titles. So far I have 2 of those episodes out. Listening to those are the tips that will help you reconnect and face the self, and learn how to be with discomfort. And those are small ways to start. And that helps chip away at the avoidance tendencies. And then the really like driving home of the starting small part is Dr. Nicole LaPera, the holistic psychologist on Instagram. Side note, I was following her when she was doing her YouTube shit, like before she was really even known in that way. And she didn't even have, and she maybe had like 1,000 followers on Instagram or something. I had her, like, I was following her from the beginning, which is kind of cool to be like, whoa, like look at someone grow in their reach, then and what people are capable of reaching in that way, and being of service and helping people. Really cool to watch. But anyway, she talks about this in her book, her first, I believe it was her first book that she published. I don't know, but how to do the work, of how it's really important to start small and make those promises to yourself, and then keep those promises to yourself. And that helps with like the boundaries and the self-betrayal journey, but I also believe it goes hand in hand with helping you overcome avoidance. And one of the examples, and by starting small in avoiding and no longer avoiding, one of the examples that she gave for keeping promises to the self was she had a client that's saying that they wanted to drink more water in their day. And so the small promise that she kept to herself was to drink a glass of water before she drank her coffee for the day. And then she kept that up until it was just something that she did, and it was a full-on integrated habit, and then she added something else on. So it wasn't like, oh, let me drink more water, let me do these somatic tools every day, and let me make art every day too. Like those are 3 things, and that's like that would be too much most likely to put on your plate to commit to. So it's like start with one thing. Then once that is a habit and not something that you think about, it's something that you just do, add another thing. Then the next little tip with expanding your capacity to be with discomfort, just notice how often that you distract yourself in the day. Listening on this episode as you continue, you'll see all ways that I was distracting myself. I was giving myself zero space to just be, because if I did that, then I would be with my thoughts. And what was that? A scary place. So if that's kind of the track and you're resonating with that, that's something to note and get curious about, of how often are you distracting yourself, and how can you slowly start to create more space for pausing and stillness in your life. Like when you go for a walk, can you just go for a walk? Can you take the headphones out? Can you not look at your phone? Can you just go for a walk and be present? Or when you're hanging out outside, same thing. Can you leave your phone inside while you go sit outside? When you're eating, when you're cooking, do you always have to have a podcast on or something going on, or scrolling on your phone when you're eating? Can you just put that down and be present with your food and eat? That would expand your capacity with being with yourself and your body, and all in all, a transferable skill of being with discomfort. And really, the really big thing with avoidance, a perspective shift more than a tip that I can offer you, is looking at this through the lens of self-love. Because avoidance is coming in to protect us from feeling pain. And when we notice that and we speak to it and we address it through the lens of self-love, then it can have more room to shift, like I said earlier, instead of just condemning it. But then also noticing when that's coming up, of wanting to avoid, or that's that ego part of self, that protector coming in, not wanting to do something. When we know it's something that we need to do, that's when we pause, of like, okay, I know there's this one thing that I could do, but I don't want to do that because that's uncomfortable, or that, whatever, fill in the blank. But then pause and ask yourself, but if I were to do this thing, is that an act of self-love? If I were to sit down and meditate and notice the sensations in my body, even though I don't want to do that, is that an act of self-love, or is that my body telling me that I need to do something different? Go through that lens. If it is an answer of self-love, even though your mind's like, I don't want to do that, but it's an act of self-love, that's when you choose to do the thing for the sake of that. And having that conversation with yourself is like, I know we don't really want to, but this is going to be so good for us. And this is going to be an act of love. And I want to take care of you, and I want to hold you, and I want to nurture you. So let's do the hard thing. And usually a lot of times afterwards, after that, you can feel way more at peace and a sense of self-trust, because you're doing that instead of avoiding. And one of the things that I used to have on my door, this is actually pretty recently, I think it was like a year ago I did this, because I was noticing the pattern of self-neglect and avoidance coming back up again. It's like, dang. So I put a sticky note on my door that I'd have to look at every time I left my room, was, how can I love myself more today? And just giving myself a moment to ask that question. How can I love myself more today? And if the loving thing to do is to do some somatic movement, even though I would rather do anything else, then the thing is to do the somatic movement. Because, guys, I know I'm a somatic practitioner, but I'm going to tell you right now, I don't want to do somatic movement all of the time. Why? Because a lot of the time it's being with the unpleasantness. And so even my mind is like, maybe not. But then I ask myself, what is the loving thing to do? How can I love myself? And the answer is move, be with the body when it's in realms of the emotions. But yeah, there's some little tips to help chip away at the avoidance tendencies, and slowly overcoming that and recognizing it more. And again, give yourself grace when it comes in waves of returning to you. It's not innately bad or that you're doing something wrong. It's just that something else is here. But okay, the end for the present day talking. And now you get to enter into the time warp of 2021 Kelsey talking. Welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. I am an art therapist who believes that the only way we can create light in our lives is by having the courage to feel our darkness. On this show, I will discuss trauma and ways to heal through modalities like art therapy, sexuality, and spirituality. I've been called to share my story to show that even in the midst of pain, I have found purpose. So join me as I continue the healing journey and create light within while feeling the darkness. I hope it inspires you to do the same. Hello world, and welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. On the last episode, I started to discuss how my healing journey began, which was when I started graduate school in August of 2017. It was during residency, and that was the first time that my trauma finally felt safe enough to come to the surface, and then I expressed some of my darkness through poetry and art, which I had never done before. Today I wanted to discuss that even though I was gifted the awareness of my trauma, which then did initiate the healing journey, healing didn't immediately take place. At residency, I was in such a safe container around other mental health professionals and had a strong support system, and then we were constantly doing art and expressing ourselves. But then I got back into the real world and I was in my own life again, and then I realized I had this information about my trauma, but I didn't know what to do with it. I had no idea how to cope, and then prior to entering grad school, I didn't realize that I used to cope through avoiding. And then the avoiding was by just keeping busy. Even in grad school, but before grad school, all of my life, I was a super busy person. I wasn't allowed to have free time because I grew up with the mindset if a person, child, I guess whoever at their point in life has free time, that just leaves room for trouble. But you know what it doesn't leave room for? Feeling your feelings. So I was always busy with school, sports, and multiple sports, part-time jobs, working out, and spending time with friends. I had no time to even feel, and if I did start feeling, I needed to just shove it down and buck up and go to the next thing because there's something else that I had to do. Then grad school started. I was working full-time and in school full-time, but for the first time I was living alone. So as a result of living alone, it gave me the space to be left with my thoughts. But after recently accepting sexual trauma, being left alone with my thoughts was a scary place. I didn't know how to handle it, and I just started to look for ways to avoid again. I would get up in the morning to work out, then go to work, come home, do homework, and then mindlessly scroll on social media until I fell asleep. Then on weekends, I was looking for anything to do to take up my time. That first semester of grad school, I went out a lot. I told myself that I was going out for the experience because in college I didn't go out that much, but deep down, I think I knew that I was afraid to allow myself to feel. I just had this mindset of keep on having fun, chase the next fun experience, and maybe I would trick myself into believing that I was fine. It was kind of the first time I was met with the thought of what is happiness as well? What does that even mean? I think I started to become awake to the fact that I was just kind of scooting through life, just mindlessly going on day by day and not really being present and not feeling. So I didn't even know that I was unhappy because I just I had never really felt things in the first place. I was just on to the next thing, go, go, go. No time to think, no time to feel. And well, let me just tell you, someday, sooner or later, that is gonna come right back and bite you in the ass. We cannot run away from our feelings, from our pain, from our trauma forever. And I know it's scary. I just said, I had just accepted the fact that I had survived sexual trauma. My thoughts were scary. I didn't want to be in my head. Hell no. But, there's always a but. I have learned that by feeling my pain, allowing myself to go there and feel these dark moments in life, it has also allowed me and freed up the space to feel things way more fully, like love and happiness and excitement and compassion. There's more room for everything when you allow yourself to feel the things you don't want to feel. But yeah, that first semester of grad school, I fell into a deep depression. I lived in a tiny ass studio, and my studio was so messy I could only see a little part of the floor that was in the kitchen. And then the counters were covered with dishes or junk. I would wash like one dish at a time if like I absolutely needed to eat, or I would just have microwavable food so I wouldn't have to do anything. And then the bathroom was absolutely disgusting. I stopped working out. I started binge eating. I was drinking pretty heavy most weekends. And then when I did have free time, I just immediately went to my phone. But I did enjoy my job, which was the only thing that contributed to me functioning. But I did not have the tools to cope or explore my emotions. It was quite the wake-up call to enter a program to become an art therapist, then realize I didn't know how to heal myself. I think initially I felt a lot of shame with that reality. Like, who am I to say I'm going to be an art therapist, but I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't even know how to take care of myself, but then I'm going to sit here and help people take care of themselves. Like, I really did feel like an imposter. Eventually, I gave myself some grace, understanding that everyone starts somewhere. I wasn't an art therapist yet. I had just started the program, so I didn't have to already be this person to embody what all that is in being an art therapist. I just had to show up and learn, and that's okay. And with that, like, it just reminds me of the quote from Maya Angelou, that do the best you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better. That's just a great one. Like, we are all always doing the best we can, which is a great reminder to take with you everywhere. Then that quote takes it a step further. Like, when you know better, do better. So I start questioning myself. Like, I had the realization, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know how to help myself and cope and explore my own emotions. Well, now I know that. And then what? Because you can stay stuck in it, or start making at least just one decision on how can I do better, or how can this change, or what can I do differently. And for me, started the whole trial and error process, because this beginning stage of healing did take a lot of trial and error. I didn't know what habits worked for me. I was figuring out what made me feel good. And then often what made me feel good also made me uncomfortable. Then if I felt too uncomfortable, I would just spiral back. Like, I would start to avoid, slip back into destructive habits, and then quickly spiral down into a depression again, because that was comfortable. There was comfort in that. It is okay, though. I mean, I will continue to say this. Healing is a process. Healing is not linear. There will be backslides. Every step of the way, I've just been figuring out as I go. Sometimes it takes backsliding so much, or being stuck, to then get sick of your own shit. Because I get sick of my own shit all the time. Like, even today when I know the tools. But back then, that first semester of grad school, I was just fucking miserable. Like I said, the only thing that got me going was going to work, which was luckily full time, so it took up a lot of the day. But I would just come home and not do anything that served me, like not do anything that ultimately like made me feel good. It just got me by to forget enough about the problems to where like I felt okay, and then we just get to the next day. But that's not life, man. And then the darkness just kept like hitting me back harder and harder, because when you like try to avoid it, it never goes away. Like, it will never go away, which took me a long time to accept that. I'm thinking about it now. I think even into the second semester of grad school, I felt like I was still dicking around there too. Like, I did more things, but then I just was really transferred into watching a lot of TV and mind-numbing things to not think about my emotions. Like, it took a while to figure out, but being in school at that time, like that first year of grad school anyway, was enough, because I was slowly learning like how how to use art and how to use it as a self-care and coping. And then the assignments in themselves, I was working on myself, so I wasn't doing absolutely nothing. But when you just discover huge trauma about yourself, that's not enough. But I wasn't there yet. I wasn't there yet to seek out more help and support and professional help and do more things to get in tune and connected with my emotions. And again, if you're there too, like, that's okay. Like, don't feel guilty about it. Again, it is all a journey and all a process. It's all about slowly adding things on and figuring out what works for you and what feels good, and then keep doing it, and then find something else. And if that doesn't work, you just keep changing it out. Like I said, it was a lot of trial and error on how to feel and how to be happy. Like, I didn't realize that it actually took work to be happy. That was a new thing for me, because prior I was just numbing, so I wasn't even aware that I was unhappy. Opening that door of challenging myself to feel, then work through my emotions, I got better with it every time I sat in the discomfort. For the most part, I'm to a point now where I no longer want to avoid. I frequently ask myself, what is the alternative? If I avoid this feeling, conversation, whatever it may be, how will this go for me? How will this serve me? What if instead I decide to face this feeling or conversation? I have learned that in the long run, I will feel better by choosing to face the uncomfort, because nothing gets solved when I avoid. I still avoid, though. I mean, I'm human. At least I know now that is like my go-to maladaptive coping mechanism, because that is like what I grew up with and all I knew was to avoid. So when I start to avoid, I'm thinking like, I want to avoid right now. This probably means this is something important. Now I know the difference of holding it in and suppressing and then it just coming out in some other way later, or releasing it onto the page or notebook or whatever it may be, or with your therapist. So when I hold stuff in and avoid, it used to be slowly. Now I think it happens way faster, but it consumes my mind and body. It's like I'm always ruminating on it, and then I feel really like tense and anxious, and I just don't feel good. And then when I release it, during the process of releasing, it doesn't always feel good during that confrontation, but then afterwards it's like, I can breathe. I can go about my day. Like, I don't worry about it anymore, because it's done. I worked through it, or I let it go, or I opened a door to where things can keep happening and keep healing. And my mind is clear, my heart is clear, and my body is more relaxed. If avoiding is your MO, then stick around, because I will definitely be continuing to share the layers of avoidance that I've worked through, which has now led me to my current reality. I now welcome the discomfort, because I know that greatness is just on the other side of it. Thank you for listening and creating light with me. If you enjoyed the show, spread the love by subscribing, leaving a review, or share it with a friend. If you related to this episode, reach out and let me know. Ways to connect are listed in the show notes. And until next time, remember, when we see the light in ourselves, we create light in others.